Well, howdy YouTube, Unky Joe here, Unky Joe's Playhouse. Time for episode or part 2 of our Proxmox series of videos. Today what I'm going to cover is the interface for Proxmox. We're going to talk a little bit about updating. We're going to talk about RAID levels. We're going to talk about ZFS. We're going to talk about some of the things I like about Proxmox as I get into it and learn it. Some of the things I don't like about Proxmox. And then I'm going to show you a few little tips to find out, for example, what network cards do I have in Proxmox, that kind of thing. So buckle up and let's get the video started right now. So on a clean boot with no VMs running after an update, you can see my memory utilization is at about 3%. And it'll stay there until we spool up one of the virtual machines, and then you will see the memory increase. So let me go ahead and spin up this Windows 10 Pro machine I have here. I'm just going to come up to the menu item over here on the left, and I'm going to click on Start, and then we'll let it start. And I was telling you what I really liked about Proxmox was that breakout console. So if we break that out, we'll actually see the virtual machine starting up. Now this uses the RAID 10 ZFS store that I created, and so we'll just let this virtual machine start up. We'll come back here to the data center, and you can see that I've assigned 4 gig of RAM to this virtual machine, and in addition to that, it's taking up an additional 2 gig of RAM just running the handling the ZFS. So there is a very large memory impact using ZFS as your file system, so be aware of that. Now the benefits of using ZFS, well, yeah, look those up. I have no doubt that ZFS claims of protecting your data are true. And Tom over at Lawrence Systems has shown us what happens when he tries to destroy a ZFS 1 or 2 file system. It was virtually impossible to get the dang thing to break. But if you're not where you can donate a lot of your system RAM, where I am, I want to be able to run more virtual machines. I'm more worried about that than having ZFS as my file system. You may want to choose a different option for your storage other than what I've done. I did a RAID 10 because it's fast on reads and writes. It's basically double mirroring of drives, but you can see there is an impact on your system as far as RAM goes. Alright, so now let's talk about updating your Proxmox, because I guess the best way to tell you is to show you. So let's go over to the Proxmox website. If you want to get support for your Proxmox system, what you do is click here on the support link here, and then you can get a subscription plan for Proxmox that'll give you access to their stable enterprise repository. And it's $74.90, 74.90 pounds, I assume those are pounds, per year, and CPU sockets. So I have 2 CPUs, so that would be double that price, but it gives you access to the enterprise repository. You get the complete feature set and community support. Now, as you can see, the price goes up exponentially depending on how much support you need. The other thing you can do is use the non-subscription repositories. There is a way to do that. So if you come to the Proxmox wiki up here and you click on package repositories or system software updates, we'll cover that in a minute. But if you click on the package repositories, here's the enterprise repository of which you have to have a subscription to. Now here is the non-subscription repository. The problem is that it tells you it can be used for testing and non-production use. It's not recommended to run on production servers. Now, 7-8 months ago when I created my first Proxmox server, I went out and put these update repositories in there, did the updates, and my system became wildly unstable. And it was at that point I stopped using Proxmox. So that's how you go and update those repositories if you don't want to pay for a subscription, but buyer beware. And I'm not going to test it. I want to make sure everything is up and running first on my Proxmox, and then I will do a backup and think about doing updates after that. However, you can do normal updates of the underlying operating system, which is Linux. So if you come here to system software updates, there's a couple of ways to do it. You can go out to a command prompt and do your apt-get update and apt-get distribution upgrade, or you can also come in here to the Proxmox interface, go to your server, and go to updates. Now, I've already done it on mine, and this will get your Linux packages all up to date. Now, I've already done that, so I can't show you. If I refresh on it, it's going to warn you don't have a valid subscription, but you don't really need it to get, because you can see it does an apt-get update. It's going to say you don't have access to the enterprise repositories, 401 unauthorized. That's okay. But you can still do the non-enterprise updates, which is your Debian stretch releases for Debian, so that at least you can get your core underlying Linux operating system. You can have it updated. You can also come out here to the shell command prompt, and you can do an apt get update. Sorry, can't type. Apt get update, and you'll see all the repositories it goes through, and it tells you some of them it can't reach. And then you can do an apt get distribution upgrade, and basically there's nothing to update. But those are the two ways that you can get updates for your underlying Linux on Debian on Linux under Proxmox. Alright, so I've booted up a second virtual machine, and you can see now quite a substantial increase in memory usage. Both of these machines are assigned 4 gig of RAM, and they're using it. So total of 8 gig of RAM plus the underlying operating system plus ZFS adds another 4 gig of RAM of overhead on there. So it's, it's quite an extensive use of RAM if you're using ZFS, or like I am, RAID 10 ZFS. Now they call it RAID 10 ZFS. It's not ZFS 1, 2, or 3. It's just RAID 10 with the ZFS file system to give you data protection. Still, not an excuse for a backup. RAID is not backup. RAID is just a way of presenting. The reason I went with RAID 10 is because I can present the speed of all 4 drives to the data store. The more drives you have in a RAID array, the faster it can be. The more spinning platters you have, the more IOPS you can have. As long as you're not putting it on something like a RAID 5 array or a RAID Z1 or Z2, where it has to calculate parity, then you're going to have abysmal write speeds. You're not going to be happy with it at all. And I don't know of anyone that actually runs their file store for their VMs on a RAID 5 array. I don't even know people who are using RAID 5 today, because it's just so dang slow, and with larger hard drives, it can be unpredictable when you go to rebuild an array later because of the way you stress the disk, but I digress. Alright, so I'm on the summary screen of my Windows 10 Pro #1 machine, and the summary tells you how many CPUs and what percentage it's using, the memory it's using, the boot disk, if there are any IP information. I don't know why, even though I have the QEMU client loaded on here and I have this turned on, it's not passing any data through, but that's all right. We'll look at that another day. I get a graph over here of my CPU usage, a graph of my network traffic, memory usage, and then disk I/O, reads and writes. Reads are in green, writes are in blue. To give you an idea of the resources it's using. Then of course I've shown you the console already, but I can come to a console session and get into my Windows 10 machine this way. If I click on the hardware tab, you'll see my keyboard layout, how much memory, processors, display, hard disk, network devices, and then of course I can add anything I need to, including like a PCI device if I had one pass through, but right now IOMMU is not enabled, so I can't use it. And I don't have any video cards, and I don't have a host adapter I want to pass through to this, so it's a non-issue for me. I'm going to skip cloud in it because I don't know what it does. But then if you come under options, you can see the options you have, the operating system type. A big one right here is the BIOS type. So if you need a UEFI BIOS, I'm not going to cover that. You could change that to CBIOS or OVMF UEFI BIOS. I'm not going to change that right now, but you do have the ability to go out and change these items after you've created them. And the big one for me was the QEMU agent. I had to enable it and then make sure the service was starting under the virtual machine. Come here under task history for the individual machine. On the monitoring tab, there's not really much to show, but it does say type help for help. I could back up this virtual machine. If I had a cluster, I could do replication. It tells you right here replication needs at least 2 nodes. However, I can do snapshots because I am on a RAID 10 ZFS volume. I can do snapshotting and all those other wonderful things. You can enable a firewall on there. I don't know enough about it to speak of it, so we'll just leave it there. And then, of course, any permissions you want to assign to that node. And then we come back up here to the summary screen. Alright, so we're back on the summary screen for the data center up here on the left-hand side. And it gives you a summary, tells you your status, how many VMs you have running, how many containers, what nodes are running, their memory use, their server IP, CPU usage, how long they've been up, etc. And then if you come under options, you have your keyboard layout, console viewer. All of these are editable. If you click on them, just click on edit. Storage. Okay, so when Proxmox installed, it created a local store for ISO images, container templates, and VZ dump backup files. Then I told it to create a local LVM storage within storage with the rest of that 500 gig hard drive. And then the main store, which is my ZFS volume, I called it main store. It contains disk images and container files. It is enabled. I did not then provision it. And then backup, you can add a backup job, and you can back up all the virtual machines right here from this one backup job. Replication, we're not going to be using it because we don't have 2 nodes, nor are we going to be using high availability. But that's the summary page on the data center. So if we come over to our local storage, Proxmox, the one that Proxmox created for ISO images, container templates, and VZ dump backup files, you can see I've got about 20 gig in use and about 80 gig free. I could even browse the content on here. You'll see I have a few Windows install images. I've got some update files, and then I've got my virt.io drivers there. And then, of course, you could go further and set permissions on it. Then if we come to the local LVM, that is a 338 gig volume, and that is where you can store virtual machines. I've configured this as to be thin provisioned, so it doesn't use up a lot of space. And I don't know exactly why this is, but this is really very slow storage. Something about the way LVM and Proxmox work together. But if you put your virtual machines onto this LVM thin storage, I don't think you're going to be real happy with the results. So if you come to main store, which is the RAID 10, it tells you it's a ZFS. It's 185 gig of 1.76 terabyte is in use. and it shows you the little chart down here. So if you go to content, you can see I have all my virtual machine disks in here. They're all raw disk images. And then again, I have permissions on this tab as well, but I don't use it. So we come back to our Proxmox 1 server. I'm going to talk about a few things that are a little strange to me. If you come down here to networking, you can see, I'm assuming now that these are my 4 Broadcom network cards, and this is my Mellanox. Now, you'll have to go out to a command prompt to find out what those are exactly. So what I can do, if once I'm on the Proxmox 1 server, I come down and do a shell, and I can type in the following command, which is right here on the screen before you. And what that'll do is it'll tell me the name and drivers that are being loaded for my network cards. Because as you saw earlier, it really doesn't give you a clear indication of what type of network cards are running in your system. But with this command, I've been able to come out and see that I have a QLogic onboard network card. I actually have 4 of those, but only 1 is active. And then I have the Mellanox ConnectX network card in there. And you can see that Proxmox has indeed loaded that Mellanox driver for that 10 gig networking card. So if there's a question in your mind as to what kind of network cards you have, that's a command you can run out of the shell to get some information. And remember, Linux is command line based. It's not got a pretty GUI on it like Hyper-V does. So moving down to the DNS setting, you see I have a simple DNS server in here. I could also add my Google servers to this as well. If you want to do that, you can see how easy that was to add it. Now during the install, and if you're going to be using, if you have a Active Directory domain and you have a .local network or even some other network in your, and you want to use your fully qualified domain name, make sure you fill out your host information. And I've just given mine a name of proxmox1.mcs.local and then Proxmox1 as its NetBIOS name. So your mileage might vary, but if you have an internal DNS, you go ahead and enter a host into your DNS as well. That way, instead of having to log in by the IP address, you can log in by the fully qualified domain name if you want to. Your time settings are right here. Again, you can edit them. It's very limited as what you can do. I don't know if this server has NTP on it. I would prefer to use that and keep my time synced with my Active Directory domain controller, but you take what you can get. You have your syslog, which is updated. This is a really nice feature, and you can even sort it by date to see what's going on with your syslog. Now coming down to disk, you see that we have the LVM module. This is the one for the storage of the ISO files, etc. The LVM thin, which is the remainder of that 500 gig hard drive, and then my ZFS main store. And if you go to detail, you can see, and I have had some errors on here. One or more devices experience an unrecoverable area. Attempt was made to correct the error. Applications are unaffected. No known data errors. So everything appears to be running okay, and you can see how it's RAID 10 with 2 mirrored sets. Alright, so if I come over to a virtual machine right now and I go down to hardware, one of the things I like about Proxmox over XCP is the fact that I can actually go out and I can jigger with the settings. And I have a few more advanced features. In other words, I can do a minimum and maximum amount of memory and allow it to do ballooning. I can edit my processors. I can even tell them what type of processor to emulate. And pardon me if I misspeak, but I don't believe XCP has a way to do this. It may have, I just haven't discovered it yet. Same way with your hard disk, you can go out and you can edit your cache, whether it's write back or write through or no write back or whatever. your network devices, this is really handy because, for example, if I were trying to run a Synology or Xpenology NAS on this machine, I need to use the E1000E or an E100 or E1000 adapter, and it has that available there. I have not found out how to do that on XCP-NG. I don't know that there is a way, but I have several different options of the network card I can emulate. And then, of course, if I need to add any other hardware, I can do that. A network device, another hard drive, an EFI disk, a USB device, serial port, or a cloud init drive. Alright, so I've booted up a second virtual machine, and you can see now quite a substantial increase in memory usage. Both of these machines are assigned 4 gig of RAM, and they're using it. So total of 8 gig of RAM plus the underlying operating system plus ZFS adds another 4 gig of RAM of overhead on there. So it's, it's quite an extensive use of RAM if you're using ZFS, or like I am, RAID 10 ZFS. Now they call it RAID 10 ZFS. It's not ZFS 1, 2, or 3. It's just RAID 10 with the ZFS file system to give you data protection. Still, not an excuse for a backup. RAID is not backup. RAID is just a way of presenting. The reason I went with RAID 10 is because I can present the speed of all 4 drives to the data store. The more drives you have in a RAID array, the faster it can be. The more spinning platters you have, the more IOPS you can have. As long as you're not putting it on something like a RAID 5 array or a RAID Z1 or Z2, where it has to calculate parity, then you're going to have abysmal write speeds. You're not going to be happy with it at all. So now what I want to do is give you an idea of the speed of the virtual machine. So I've got my Windows 10 Pro unit up here. I'm going to go ahead and click on the console, break that out. The nice thing about the no VNC is it's got a pop out here, and you can go down here and you got your Control-Alt-Delete. You can resize it, you can change your settings, and you can shut down and restart the system. I'm just going to go ahead and log in. And then, of course, what I want to do is my network transfer test. I want to copy some files from my home NAS over to this machine and see what kind of transfer speeds we get. So I already have a test directory out here. I'm just going to go ahead and make sure it's empty. And then I'm going to go back to my video drive, and I'm going to copy my Alien series over. So I'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these directories. Just right click and choose copy, and then come over here to my test folder, and then we will paste. And let's see what kind of speeds we get. Now you'll see there's some dips in the speed. They come up, they go down, and I think that is because of the caching I'm using. When it fills the buffer, it then writes out the cache to the disk, and there's that momentary lapse that you're seeing right there in the network transfer speed. But overall, I'm averaging about 100 megabytes per second, which is excellent. It goes up and down, but that's to be expected with a virtual machine. Even Windows virtual machines will do that. And then, of course, the last little bit of the copy always takes the longest amount of time. Have you ever noticed that? Yeah. And there you go. It's copied the data over now. So, and I've tweaked this machine and given it really to get the speed out of it that I need. This is the one thing that will kill the deal for me. If I cannot create a virtual machine under any hypervisor, I don't care whether it's Hyper-V or ESXi or XCP, if I can't get 100 megabyte transfer speeds on my network with my Windows 10 and other clients, then I'm not interested in using the product. So we'll go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and log out of this virtual machine. And then I can put away no VNC by just closing it. Let's come to my Windows Server machine. Let's do the same thing with it. Let's go ahead and click up here on the console connection. We'll go ahead and log into this machine. I'll bring this into the center of the screen so you can see it a little bit better. And we're going to go back to our C drive on this virtual machine. This is a Windows Server 2016. And I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that I empty these directories. Right click, select them all and delete. And then we'll come back and we'll do a connection to the video drive. And it's not a member of the domain, so I have to log in manually, but it's no big deal. Go back to Sci-Fi, go get our Alien series. Right click, copy, come back to the C drive in the test folder, and paste it. And let's see how our copy speeds are. So you'll see we're getting really good copy speeds all through this. We have our little momentary dips and blips, especially around the last part of copying the file, but in Windows 10 and Windows Server 2016 are the same kernel, so the performance on both of those should be the same. What'll be interesting is when I create a Windows 7 virtual machine, and we'll see what kind of transfer speeds we get on there. And again, it's always the last little bit of data copying that seems to take the longest, but overall we got about 100 megabytes in transfer speed copying those files over across the network from my Exponology NAS across the network into a virtual machine. So evidently I have both the Windows 10 and the Windows Server 2016 machine set up properly using the correct drivers and whatnot. Now, of course, this last bit of copying is taking the longest amount of time. And as you can see, this is what I talk about when I say Microsoft time. Even though it says it's got about 5 seconds left, that could take any amount of time it wants to. But we'll let it finish. And there you go, copy complete. And then again, I'm just going to log out of this virtual machine and close the console connection and come back up here, and you can see how our memory increased with our file copies. It went up as high as 25 gig of RAM. That's one thing. One other thing I'm not real pleased with on Proxmox. I understand why they have to do it that way because they're using ZFS, but as you can see now, just by booting up 2 virtual machines and doing some copies, my RAM is now up to from 40 to 55%. So I'll be interested to see. What I'm going to do now is turn off both of these virtual machines. I'm going to shut them down and see what happens to our memory. So let's just go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go, I don't know that I have the QEMU software working properly, so I'm just going to go ahead and log into these machines, and I'm going to shut them down via the shutdown command under Windows. And I always like to hardware maintenance planned. So we'll wait for this one to shut down, and then we'll go shut down our Windows 10 machine. And remember, our RAM usage was at about 55%. Okay, that machine is now shut off. Now we come do the same thing with our Windows 10 machine. Yeah, middle of December, and yes, my air conditioner is running. I like it cool here in my office, so go ahead and shut this one down as well. You can see those Windows 10 tiles have not populated either. I was hoping leaving the machine up a while they would populate, but that's Microsoft's wonderful Windows 10. Alright, so this machine should be shut off here in a minute or two. And there it goes. Now it's turned off. Okay, so now if we come back up here to Proxmox, we'll wait till this machine goes gray, and there it has. And now if we come back up to the data center, you'll see that it's still, even though those two virtual machines that were using 8 gig of RAM, 4 gig each, released their RAM, but we still have 13 gig in use and no VMs running at all. So what I will be curious to see is if this RAM usage goes down in the next, 5 or 10 minutes, to see if Proxmox actually releases this back to the underlying hypervisor. So stay tuned for that. So there you go. I hope you got some use out of that. As you discovered, there are some things I do like about Proxmox quite a bit, and some I don't. But I think they're not deal killers for me. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is ZFS. If I were not using ZFS, I would have a lot more memory available to give to my virtual machine. So it's a trade-off. If you want to use local attached storage or direct attached storage on your Proxmox, you're going to have to give a little to get ZFS. And mainly that is you're going to have to give up your RAM. Now there is a way on the wiki on the wiki article that I linked to, there is a way to go in there and limit the amount of RAM that ZFS uses, but I just want to leave it alone for now and go from there. But if you're using storage shared storage like I am, you could just pop it over onto an iSCSI or an NFS share, and then you're not going to have that memory overhead you would using ZFS on Proxmox. So that's something to keep in mind. Or, for that matter, if you had a RAID controller within the server as I do, you could put it in RAID 10 mode. You're not going to get the data protection from corruption. I don't know about you, but I've never had a bit rot occur that I can remember in 30 years. So, the hullabaloo about ZFS preventing errors, I'm sure it's true. But if it's not something I've ever experienced, it's not real high on my radar to be on the lookout for. But I'm going to take them at their word that ZFS helps prevent data corruption. We'll see if that rings out to be true. I don't know enough about it to be honest with you to make a informed decision or comment on it. But like I say, in 30 years of dealing with IT and computers, hard drives used to fail quite frequently, but now, with RAID, with Synology Hybrid RAID, you really have protection against that. And hard drives are made so much better today than they used to be. So your mileage might vary. But what I would do is, if I were you and you don't have a lot of RAM to dedicate to Proxmox, and I would use shared storage, and I think you'll be happy. And we will be using shared storage on Proxmox. I'm going to save that for a future video, though. Now, unfortunately, you're going to have to wait for the next episode of this series in order to learn how to set up virtual machines. And what I'll probably be doing there is doing a Windows 7 and a Windows 10 install to show you how those are done. And then we may set up a VLAN, show you how to set up a VLAN with Proxmox. I don't know yet. We'll see when we get to the video, but it'll be worth the wait. So, well, we hope you found this video entertaining and informative. If nothing else, give us a thumbs up down below if you liked it. Leave your comments in the comments section. I always look forward to those, good or bad. I always look forward to them. However, if you're going to be rude, you'll probably notice your comment just disappears off the stream, and that's because it's my channel and not yours. So if you can't be polite and courteous, don't bother to post, because it's just going to get deleted. And please donate if you're so inclined. We take PayPal, we take Patreon. We do appreciate your continued support. We're hoping to get to 5,000 subs by the end of the year. If it happens, great. If not, I want you to know at the end of the year here, I really appreciate everybody's participation on this channel. Without you guys, I wouldn't be doing these videos, and I would have no reason to do them. But I'm glad that you're getting some use out of them. Would I like to have 20 or 30,000 subs? Hell yeah, who wouldn't? But, you know, every time I look a little down on myself for only having 4,000 subs, people remind me, hey, my channel didn't have that many subs after 2 years, so, you know, be happy with what you got. So I am happy and I am thankful, but it's always nice to see the bump in subs. So if you're not already a subscriber, please give us a chance and subscribe to us. It would mean a lot. And come back and see us again. Hope, again, you enjoyed the video. And don't forget, we'll see you guys on the other side.